All right, when you picture the Garden of Eden, what's the first thing that pops into your head? I'm guessing it's probably a tree, maybe a snake, and, of course, a piece of fruit that pretty much changed everything. But here's the thing, the story that we all think we know, well, it might just have a fascinating twist.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a question that kind of flips the script on centuries of art, culture, and tradition. We're going to dig into whether one of the most iconic symbols in all of history is really just a huge case of mistaken identity.
So how did the apple become the star of this whole story anyway? I mean, our modern idea of the forbidden fruit is almost without exception an apple. But here's the catch. The original text never actually mentions one. This whole idea didn't come from scripture, it actually came from art.
For centuries, artists and poets have used the apple as a kind of visual shorthand for temptation, for knowledge, for the fall of humanity. It's an incredibly powerful symbol that is just everywhere. It's baked into our culture, from these incredible Renaissance masterpieces all the way to the logo of one of the biggest tech companies on the planet.
And that just goes to show you how deeply this one image is stuck in our collective brain. But here's the big question. Was it an accurate choice? Or did artists and storytellers just kind of latch onto a convenient and maybe totally wrong visual?
All right, so if the story didn't say it was an apple, where did the idea come from? Well, the answer seems to be a simple case of mistaken identity, not happening in a garden, but happening in a translation.
The whole story changes at the moment the Hebrew Bible was translated into Latin. Now, for hundreds and hundreds of years, Latin was the language for scholars and the church in the Western world. And a tiny little linguistic quirk in that translation led to a massive cultural misunderstanding.
And it all comes down to this one single Latin word, malum. Now, as you can see, this word can mean an evil or a misfortune, but it can also mean an apple. And right there, that's where things start to get really interesting.
So here's the deal. The Bible talks about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which in Latin would have the word mali for evil. Early artists and theologians, who were probably having a bit of fun with this amazing linguistic pun, basically smushed together the abstract idea of evil, malin, with the very concrete, very easy-to-paint image of an apple, also malum. What started as a clever pun basically became historical fact.
Okay, so we've seen how this whole apple myth was probably born from a clever, or maybe just accidental, play on words. So let's go back to the source code. Let's see what the original text actually says.
There it is, straight out of Genesis. Now listen to the words. The fruit of the tree. That's it. It is incredibly general. There's no mention of a specific type, no color, no variety. The text is, you might say, intentionally vague about it.
And if you go back even further to the original Hebrew, the word they used is peri. It's just a generic term for fruit. It's the exact same way we would use the word fruit to describe anything from a grape to a pineapple. The writers simply didn't feel the need to specify.
So if it wasn't an apple, what could it have been? Well, scholars actually have some really interesting ideas. Some think it might have been a fig, since Adam and Eve used fig leaves to cover themselves up right after. Others point to the pomegranate, which was a huge symbol of fertility in the ancient Near East. Grapes have been suggested, and so has the etrog, a kind of citrus fruit. And the thing is, all of these were way more common in that part of the world than apples were.
But here's the real twist. Debating whether it was a fig or a pomegranate or a grape, we're still kind of missing the point. Because focusing on the specific species of the fruit means you're overlooking what the story is actually about.
Look, the story isn't about botany, it's an allegory about what it means to be human. The fruit is just a prop, really. The real story is focused on these three giant themes: the freedom we have to make a choice, the idea that our actions have consequences, and humanity's really complicated relationship with knowledge.
And that's really the heart of it. The incredible power of the Eden story doesn't come from what kind of fruit was on the tree. It comes from what it symbolizes: free will, the sting of disobedience, and that exact moment that humanity became responsible for its own future. The fruit could have been a peach. It's the choice to eat it that matters.
So think about that. One of our most lasting, most powerful cultural symbols comes down to a simple linguistic pun. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other things do we just take for granted? How many other huge foundational stories that shape the way we see the world are actually based on just one single misunderstood word?